everyone, and welcome to our live author event, live here from the LaPorte Branch Library. My name is Taylor Carlton, and I am the Young Adult Program Librarian here at the LaPorte Branch. And we're very excited to have y'all here for our live author visit. So first, I will introduce our wonderful, wonderful author and equally wonderful moderator. So Preeti Chhibber is an author, speaker, and freelancer living in Georgia. Dubbed a Spider-Man superfan and author by Publishers Weekly, you can usually find her writing your favorite characters or binge reading her way through several series at once. She co-hosts several podcasts, including Desi Geek Girls and Tar Valon or Bust, and appeared on several panels at New York Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con, and on screen on Sci-Fi. Our moderator for today's author's visit is the author Samira Ahmed, who is a best-selling author of Love, Hate, and Other Filters, Internment, Mad, Bad, and Dangerous to Know, and Amira Hamza, The War to Save the Worlds, as well as Miss Marvel comic book miniseries. Her poetry, essays, and short stories have appeared in numerous publications and anthologies, including the New York Times, Take the Mic, Color, Outside the Lines, Vampires Never Get Old, and A Universe of Witches. When she's not reading or writing, she can be found on her lifelong quest for the perfect pastry. And I want to welcome them to the chat. And then for our LaPorte viewers, if you have any questions, you can save them to the end for our live audience Q&A. So I'll turn it over to y'all.
Thanks, Taylor.
No problem.
Hey, Preeti.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
We haven't seen each other in a little bit.
Since
May.
I was like, it's been a few months.
I wish we could be together in person.
I know, because I think that would be really exciting. I
know. Well, hopefully soon. But anyway, hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. Sorry you're just like going to have this to deal with this kind of just chatting with each other because we're friends and we're both nerds. And so it's like, perfect.
Who better? You're writing Miss Marvel. I'm writing Peter Parker. It's like perfect.
It's like match made in Marvel heaven. Okay, so Preeti, first of all, congratulations. This fantastic, funny book just was released. Oh, wait, has it been 1 week? No.
It's been 6 days.
6 days. 6 days. It's still
and you know what? Well, wait, you know what? Today is Spider-Man Day. It is officially the 60th anniversary today of Spider-Man.
Wait, today's the 60th anniversary of Spider-Man? Oh my God, that's so amazing. So that means everyone watching, you must pick up Spider-Man Social Dilemma today to celebrate this anniversary. Also, I think you should have like a cupcake or something to celebrate.
Right? Yes.
Something.
I'm going to find a cake.
A slice of pizza. If you can get a slice of New York pizza, that would be great. Okay, so Preeti, I can't believe today's Spider-Man Day. That's actually so cool. I wish I would have known before. I would have tried to dress more spidery. Give us a quick synopsis of this story.
Sure. So this is the first book in a trilogy, and we open, and Peter Parker has been Spider-Man for like a few months. He's a sophomore in high school, and this kind of has him dealing with what are a bunch of different things going on. Like there are villains out, there's weird stuff happening with people, there's this museum heist that happens, and he knows that they're connected, but he can't figure out how. So he gets help from Mary Jane. He gets, he was working for the Daily Bugle. It's like a lot of our favorite Spider-Man-isms, but in a brand new adventure. And there's like the secret threat that's lurking over all of it.
Yes. And we actually see that threat pretty early on, because we see this kind of funky, sort of like cryptic messages. So you were described as a Spider-Man super fan, but I almost think that's like an understatement. I think it's like, I don't know, like a Spider-Man super duper fan. I don't know what the word is, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious fan. So can you just talk to us, I mean, just from as a fan first, because that's how you first came to Spidey. Talk to us a little bit about your love of Spidey, and then how you somehow were able to translate your love of Spidey into becoming a Spider-Man author. And this isn't even your first Spidey venture.
That's true.
So talk to us a little bit about how does one make that dream happen? How did you make that dream happen?
Well, I think first, Spider-Man is a favorite because he is so much like us. He messes up all the time. He tries so hard to like make the right decisions and to do the right thing. And life is hard for him. Like, he can't pay his bills. He gets his homework in late. Things always go wrong. But despite that, he still tries to be a hero, and he tries to be the best hero he can be. So he's both like accessible and aspirational. Like, we want that, right? We all can identify with those like mundane life problems, and we try to be good despite all the hardships. He just happens to be a superhero with spider powers. And then how I got it was I'm a big proponent of like being loud about what you love. And I was extremely loud about loving Spider-Man.
You mean, is it because you were only tweeting about it like 30 to 40 times a day for like the last couple years? Is that what you mean by that?
I mean, yes. I also mean, I like met someone at a podcast recording in like 2014, probably 2013, something like that. Brandon Snyder, who is a fellow Kidlit author and so wonderful. We were both recording this podcast at Midtown Comics at like 10 p.m. at night. And I like in passing mentioned to him like what a big Spider-Man fan I was. And I hadn't published anything. Like I wrote for like a comics website, and we like stayed connected over several years. And in 2018, he emailed me and was like, "You're going to get an email from Marvel Press." And he put my name in as a possibility for writing this tie-in novel to Spider-Man Far From Home called Peter and Ned's Ultimate Travel Journal. And luckily I'd been writing on the side, and I had some like portfolio clips to show them as like proof of like, yes, I can write. And that's sort of how it happened. It was just because I kept being like, hey, I love Spider-Man. I want to write Peter Parker. Let me do this.
I mean, look, I feel like that is actually so great for you to share, because it's just about, putting your dreams out there.
Yeah.
And it's, you can hope for something to happen, but hope is actually something that needs to be active.
Yes.
And so you basically put it out there, and you also, I mean, you weren't just like random person on the street, like, oh, what's this Spider-Man thing? Let me write Spider-Man. You had a deep knowledge of Spider-Man. You love Spider-Man. You're making connections in sort of the broader kidlit and comic world. And you really, laid the foundation for your success at this. So I just think that's an awesome story for everyone to hear. It's very inspirational. So is Spidey the first comic book that you ever picked up?
No, funnily enough, far too young for it. I had an older, I have an older brother, but when I was little, my older brother was very, very into comics, and a lot of my comics stuff was like osmosis through him. And I remember finding a collected volume of The Death of Superman. So I must have been like 8. I was very young, and I read it, and I did not understand anything.
That was like, what year was that?
That was probably like the early 90s, I think.
Yeah, okay.
I was like somewhere between 8 and 10 years old, and I didn't understand what was happening in the story, but I loved like the art and the storytelling and all of that, where I was like, this is an amazing experience getting to read this sort of like very deep, clearly like awful thing that's happening through this medium, because up until then it was like Archie Comics was my relationship to comics.
I was an Archie Comics person too. I feel like for a lot of girls that was kind of like the first intro, and like Archie Comics are smaller, like literally smaller. They're like these kind of mini paperbacks, and they were sold,
at like grocery stores.
Yes, at the grocery store. Yeah. I mean, God, I wish like Miss Marvel could be sold at little grocery stores.
Honestly, I feel like RG Comics, they're so accessible. Like we didn't have a comic book store in my town. Like there was no way of like getting weekly issues. So RG Comics at like the local pharmacy.
Yeah, pharmacy too. It was like at our pharmacy and at the grocery store.
Yeah.
People, only old people will recognize this illusion, but they were basically with our Reader's Digest size.
Yeah.
So they're not as big as they're like this. They're like this size, and they were just like so easy to put in your pocket. You could take them in the car. You could take them everywhere. And remember, like back in the day, we did not have phones or anything else. So I was a kid who always had like a book or something.
Yeah.
And it was paperback. So you're like, you
can fit.
Fit everywhere. Exactly.
And there's no continuity because every booklet had like, they were just little short gags, basically. Like sometimes they'd go on for maybe like three different like issues. But these digests were just like thin little, like full of thin little gag shorts. And so you just were like, you could pick it up, put it down, and it didn't matter. It was just like this like accessibility point.
I mean, I think that's what's so cool about comics is that they are accessible. Comics are for everyone.
Yes.
I am not a comic gatekeeper. If you have never read anything about Spider-Man, if you have never seen a single Spider-Man movie, I invite you to like pick up this Spider-Man, to start with the comics, to do Spidey, especially is a superhero for all, I think. And it's just like what you said, he's both accessible and aspirational. So we talked a little bit about heroism, and you know, Spider-Man, the line that everybody knows from Spider-Man, that I think defines heroism, is not really one that was said by Spider-Man in the comics. is from his uncle, which is with great power comes great responsibility.
Yes.
We talk about let's talk about that in two ways. One, let's talk about it as you as an author, how that came to play, because being able to write this incredible legacy character is a lot of responsibility, and you have power in creating the story. And then let's also talk about how that, or if it was in any way like a guiding sort of principle for you as you wrote this novel, because Peter's just like 16, he's still young, but he's learning those lessons. He's messing up along the way. But it's cool. So that's, I guess, a two-part question.
I think for the first part, it was pretty daunting when I initially got the email that was like, is this something you would be interested in doing? My initial reaction was like, oh my God, did you mean to send this email to me?
First review, like, I fainted, somebody get me smelling salts.
Literally. It's like the first, I like looked back at my inbox the other day to find the original email, and the first one underneath it was a forward to two of my best friends, which is like, oh my God, in all caps. Because I couldn't believe it. But the prospect was very daunting because he is such like a beloved character. And so wanting to do right by him and for fellow fans was really important to me. But part of that is acknowledging that he's been around for 60 years. And so there are going to be things that I love about him that other Spider-Man fans might not, and vice versa. And so really honing in on what makes Peter Parker important to me and putting that on the page. And so staying true to my own perspective of what I love about Spider-Man, because I know that there are other people who will have sort of that same relationship to him. And then second was that sort of like accessibility point where I did want to be very sure that anybody could pick this book up, because it's also a daunting prospect to get into Spider-Man, into the comics, when you look and there are 900 issues out. Like, where do you start?
Yeah. Right. And there's different sort of like, yes. And also like, you might not understand the continuity, and you might, but this is actually, I think, a great place for middle grade kids, for high school kids, but also for adults to start. I mean, I feel like because he's a high schooler, you're writing it for younger kids, but you never talk down. You make this book and this character accessible for everyone. And that's, when we're talking about power and responsibility, I think you did an amazing job with that, because you're carrying a mantle, and I know I can imagine that it is pretty daunting.
I think you know firsthand how daunting that might be.
Well, Ms. Marvel's not 60 years old,
but Ms. Marvel, a decade of comics is no joke. Coming in and with the number of appearances Kamala has had across comics and video games and cartoons.
It's awesome and it's amazing, and it's hard to explain how cool it is that you and I are both writing these like legacy characters for Marvel. Because 100% neither you or I, when we were, I'm older than you, but when we were both like say 7 or 8 or 9 when we were getting those Archie comics, I'm sure neither of us imagined being able that we were going to be writing these Marvel characters. Not even like, a tiny little.
No. I feel like when I was like 19 and looking up the Wikipedia for Gambit and Rogue or like Spider-Man's history, no way in my life would I have thought to have been contributing to that sort of piece of canon, which is wild, right?
Right?
Like somewhere there's going to be like in this issue with like a footnote and it'll go down and be like Ahmed, Samira.
Well, it's just, I think, there's going to be, I just think about this because I know young kids who I've given Spider-Man, your Spider-Mans to, and just how cool it is that kids are reading your books that you've written about this incredibly iconic character, and they're going to be able to come up to you and be like, Auntie Preeti, I read your book, or so and so Auntie gave me your book to read. That is so cool for young people to see.
It's really awesome, and it's like a little terrifying, and so kind of bringing that sense into the book as well, because I think something that Peter has to deal with a lot is anxiety, especially I was, the minute, I thought about writing a book that was going to be sort of upper middle grade, like younger YA, like 16-year-old Peter Parker, I was like, I want to put him in that place where he's kind of new at it. He's not brand new. Mm-hmm. He's not like, he hasn't just gone through this awful experience of losing his uncle, but he's been at it for a few months. And he's still sort of figuring it out. I really wanted to highlight that kind of coming of age aspect to it in a kidlit way, which pushes forward some of that awkwardness and pushes forward some of that really questioning every choice you're making. Like when you aren't necessarily confident in the way you're moving through the world, no matter what you show the world, that internal voice is so loud sometimes. And so I really wanted to pull that forward in this book and be like, look how he has to deal with these things too, like all of us do. Is that, oh my God, why did I say that like that?
You have that, you nail his voice right away in the first chapter, because we see that internal monologue. We see him questioning things, and it's about completely dorky stuff. It's literally God, why do I have this stupid mosquito bite? Why is it so itchy? I'm wearing so many layers of clothes. And I'm not even doing spoilers because, guys, this is right in the beginning. But I guess one of the things I really love about Peter, and I think that you do too, because it comes through on the page, is that he's really a dork.
Yes. Huge dork.
Talk about why him being a dork. I actually think it's really important.
Yes.
So tell us why that is, and why you made it. I wouldn't say that that's the emphasis of the novel, or to have some key points where his dorkiness comes through.
Well, I think it's Spider-Man's a dork. Peter Parker is a huge dork. That is canon. Some of my favorite moments are when he's interacting with other superheroes and they're like, you are so annoying. What is your deal?
And I think that what's fun is in all sort of, and maybe you should actually explain this too, because Spider-Man exists, the MCU is different from the comics, which is different from the novel. So explain that for a second. But also, I just want to say that in pretty much every version of those Peters that we've seen, the dorkiness is always there.
It's It's actually funny. The writing Peter and Ned set me up really well for this book, because my first version of Peter and Ned's Ultimate Travel Journal, which was a tie-in piece to Spider-Man Far From Home. So it was kind of bringing forth story elements that I didn't write. I wrote this whole manuscript, which is in voice. So it's like Peter and Ned and MJ writing notes to each other on their sort of school trip to Europe. And I wrote the whole thing and I sent it in, and I got notes back from the studio that was like, Peter wouldn't say this. Like, there were all these like little jokes I had, and they're like, Peter's not the funny one. And you think about it, in the MCU, he's not. His humor comes from his earnestness or his reactions. He's much more the straight man in a lot of those situations. My Peter Parker
is quippier.
He's quippy. He's funny. He uses humor as a defense mechanism.
Totally.
Like that is my Peter Parker. And that's very comics Peter. Like my favorite Peter is sort of down on his luck, early 20s, like literally evicted from his apartment, has to sleep on his friend's couch, but still try to be a superhero without anyone finding out, Peter. So like, what's wonderful about a character who has been around for 60 years is that there's so many creators who have written him. You're going to find things you like throughout all of the eras and be able to identify with that. But it gives you the opportunity to be like, well, this is my version of Peter Parker, and these are the pieces I'm going to take. And so that dorkiness, I think, is very key, is that like genuine and earnestness and like awkwardness is so a part of who he is.
Yes. And it's so teen.
Yes.
Because he's grappling with, it's like, let's put aside the fact that he is also a superhero. So I like to say about Miss Marvel, a regular girl with an extraordinary job. So Peter's is like a regular guy with an extraordinary job. So put his extraordinary job to the side, because he's dealing with a crush, homework, trying to be cool when he 100% can't be. Yep. Why is he spilling pizza glop on himself? There's just something that's so charming and you really want to root for this guy, because it's like that earnestness that you're talking about. It's like, you can do it and be slightly less of a dork, Peter.
He can't.
You want it for him so badly. It's just, but that's what I think, that's part of the enduring charm of Peter Parker and Spider-Man, because like you said, 60 years. That's a hell of a legacy. Ooh, a heck of a legacy. Sorry with the Shelby kids. Sorry. I meant heck. Don't swear, kids. Sorry. Okay. You know what? I realized I've only asked you like 3 questions and I've talked to you for like 20 minutes. Hang on. See, this is what happens when we get together, everybody. If you listen to a podcast we're on, it's just us like talking over the host, laughing about things. Just 2 quick questions about the book. I want you to talk about the villain a little bit.
Yes.
And it's not a spoiler, because just folks, there is a villain that he has to take on in this. So tell us who the villain is and why you chose that villain, or did Marvel ask you to do that?
So I got to choose, it's Sandman in the first book. So there is this like creepy overarching threat that that's spoilery, so we'll leave that. But for each of the books, I got to sort of pick a Spider-Man villain I liked. And so Sandman for the first book felt fun because he's a little bit B-list. He's not like a big mastermind. He's not like somebody who has all this baggage, like kind of historical story baggage attached to him. And
B-list.
A little bit. He's a little bit of a B-list. He's not like Shocker, but he's like, people might know his name because he was in, Spider-Man 3.
Yes, right.
But what was fun about doing prose, because it's not illustrated, there are no like pictures in this book, was I had to figure out things about these characters that like you don't have to think about in the comics, because you can just show it.
Because the artist does that for you.
Yes. You get to be like, this is sort of what I'm thinking for this.
Yeah, and you're like,
can you draw it?
And you're like, brilliant artist, take my weird words and make them do something beautiful. And then they do.
Whereas this, I like wrote this sentence that was like, Sandman, it was something like he's being squeezed so tight he could hear his bones creak. Mm-hmm. And I had to email my editor and be like, does Sandman have bones? Does he have...
What happens to his bones? Because
so they sent me back like a page from like a Marvel character encyclopedia, which did not answer my question. So I was like, I think based on what I know, he's all sand. So I think he's just densely compacted sand with like a human veneer.
But what happened to his bones?
He's just sand.
But he had bones at some point.
Then he went into that thing and became Sandman.
So they just like maybe
he's been
sand is made up of his ground up bones in part.
He can use all sand. There was a Chip Zdarsky comic in the Spectacular Spider-Man where we learned that all of his consciousness is held in one grain of sand, and he can just control all this other sand. So I was like, I guess he's just sand.
Wow, that is actually that is an amazing point. Now I'm like, but where's that one grain of sand?
That's the thing. That it's like, wild things you have to think about.
What happens if like Spidey thwipped that particular grain of sand, or is it lodged so deeply inside?
I think of the odds you would need to be able to do that, right? It's like this
what if there could be a mind control of that one piece of sand? Then he could be controlled. That's fascinating.
Yes.
Because there's a mind control element in this book, but I don't want to talk about that too much. I mean, it's a little bit on the book flap, so that's not a total spoiler. It's on the okay. We could actually have a very extended conversation about Sandman, the physiology of Sandman, and also all of these characters.
Listen, just wait till like book 2. I'm using the Spot. I've already said that, but I'm using the Spot, and I love the Spot because the Spot is literally just made of interdimensional spots. So I got to write a scene where Spidey like punches into a spot and punches himself in the face.
Oh God, that's awesome.
It's awesome.
You know what I love? I call it Marvel physics.
Yes.
I love Marvel physics because for Miss Marvel, I tried to actually root a lot of it in real physics.
So hard.
I'm a nerd like that. And I'm reading all these physics books, and my editor is like, just explain, just has to work in the context of like, Samira, you don't need to have all this stuff. And I was like, but in this way, it could possibly even work.
No.
What are you doing? It's a comic. It doesn't, you can't put like a 20-page like little mini thesis in here about how spots could actually, spot is actually like punching a wormhole and you come back and punch yourself. But it's so cool to write. Okay, I think we need to take some audience questions.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I literally have like 7 or 10 other questions I haven't even asked you. Okay. Taylor, there you are. So, Taylor, I was taking up everyone's time because I'm just personally like dying to know some of these questions.
Yeah, it looks like we have an audience question here. Do you want to come up and ask?
Yeah.
You're wearing your Marvel Spider-Man shirt.
Hi.
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 Can you make like a comic book about like the whole Spider-Verse?
Can I write a whole comic book about the Spider-Verse?
Yeah, like a new comic about the Spider-Verse.
I would love to. There are a lot of amazing Spider-Verse comics that are coming out and that exist with a lot of amazing creators. But I would 100% love to write a Spider-Verse comic. I would totally do it.
Oh.
Can I ask you a question? Would you like to write a Spider-Verse?
Yeah.
That'd be something cool. It sounds like I with that big smile on your face, it seems like you have some ideas.
You might have an idea about what can happen in a Spider-Verse comic.
Well, I'm thinking about how Spider-Man is fighting a whole bunch of bad guys, like bad guys from another universe, and each Spider-Man tries to defeat them, but the bad guys from the other universe.
Mm-hmm. I would read that.
I would read it too. That sounds awesome.
Well, thank you so much. Let's give a big round of applause. So we have a question from one of our online viewers, and their question is to both of you, I would say, what is the most challenging thing about writing a character, whether that's Spider-Man or Miss Marvel, that's so well known? What is the biggest challenge, whether that's from a craft perspective or from a fan perspective?
I can say that for Spider-Man, two things were particularly challenging. One was there's a very limited number of ways that you can say shoots a web in prose. You can only say it like 3 or 4 different ways. And then the second thing was just remembering and being very mindful of the fact that just because I love this Peter Parker doesn't mean everyone will love this Peter Parker. And that I had to be okay with that because the fans are wide and varied. And this version might not line up with who their favorite version is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for Miss Marvel, so I was writing the comics, so I did get to have the benefit of having awesome artists to work with and put them and make them sensible. So I think for me, I was new to writing comics and new to writing superhero characters, so I really, really wanted to get her voice right, Miss Marvel's voice right, and in large part because of what Preeti said before, which is, there's like a legacy to this character, even though she's only about 10 years old. There's a huge fan base of people who are just love her and are devoted to her. And I really just wanted to honor, what Sana Amanat and G. Willow Wilson had created in Miss Marvel. And I just, I'm a fan too. So, and I'm sure for Preeti, this is the same thing. It's sort of like we get to write fan fiction.
Yes. I mean, it's almost, I don't know if this is how you felt, Samira, but I definitely had a point where Marvel they were very awesome. Like there was nothing that should have been in this book that I wasn't allowed to put in this book. But there were points where early on I had like a fight with him and the Sinister Six. And they were like, maybe that's too much for the first book. Maybe like reel it in just a little bit. I wanted to put all of the things.
Like my headcanon, it belongs there. Well, I'm glad to. So Marvel gave you like a pretty good amount of leeway on doing what you want and picking like the villain you wanted, which is awesome. And you nailed the voice. So I'm glad that they gave you this flexibility.
Yeah, let's see. Do we have any more audience questions up here? Because I know we have a lot of virtual ones. Let's see here. So one of our virtual questions, and this is a question like I have as just like a moderator, and it's in our chat. Who is your favorite Spider-Man? And that could be an actor, a comic book character. Like, who is your Spider-Man? Because mine is Miles Morales, because I love the Kid Lip books. I love Into the Spider-Verse. But who is your Spider-Man?
I think for actor-wise, I always go with Yuri Lowenthal voiced Spider-Man in Spider-Man PS4. And it's my favorite Spider-Man movie is that video game. And then I love Spider-Man India, Pavitr Prabhakar. I love that he exists. I am desperate to write him someday because we have like an Indian Spider-Man and it's awesome.
I know he's only been in a little bit. I actually told the Marvel editor too. I was like, can we get him into Miss Marvel? Like, what can we do with him? Like, let's bring him on somewhere else.
Please.
That would be so cool.
This is a great question, too, also from our online chat. For both authors, which Marvel character would you like to write next? If it wasn't Miss Marvel, if it wasn't Spider-Man, I'm going to take off the table. Y'all can't swap either. It has to be like outside the Venn diagram.
Before we answer that question, I'm just going to put this out there because I haven't, since Preeti was like, you should put out there what you want. What I would really love is if Preeti and I could do a one-shot together.
Yes.
Of a Spidey Miss Marvel crossover, because Spider-Man and Miss Marvel have met. So I think a one-shot crossover event would be amazing.
Agreed. But who would you, not Spidey, not Miss Marvel, who would you write?
You go first.
Okay.
And I'm like, let me think about it more. It's really tough.
I would love, I don't know if I could be like, I would love to write Nightcrawler. I think Nightcrawler would be really fun because it could be like a romantic action thriller from, like old Hollywood style. He's so swashbuckling. I think that would be awesome.
I think swashbuckling I would love to see you write it in like that. I mean, you know, even you could do like a black and white kind of flourish thing. That would be awesome. I don't know.
Yeah, like Turner Classic Movies type.
Yeah, totally. Oh my God. I think, oh gosh, I think Moon Knight would be pretty cool.
Ooh, yeah, that'd be good.
I mean, I like how it dips into like sort of, you know, the mythology, and then I also really love when we can take our characters to non-US locations. I think that's really fun. But I also think, oh gosh, I don't know.
There's so many good ones.
I think I feel like Kate Bishop would be fun to write also. And Marika Nijkamp just did a mini-series arc for Hawkeye Kate Bishop, which everyone should read, which is a lot of fun.
Good.
I think Kate Bishop would be fun too, because she's kind of sassy, and I don't know, I love that. I think she just seems like a fun character too.
Yeah, and I would love to read any of y'all's interpretations of like any Marvel character. And I think as a wrap-up question, what advice would you have for young people who want to write either like superhero characters or original characters? What advice would you have in terms of how to write a story or how to get your first word on the page?
I always read so widely, read voraciously, read as much as you can. And then if you want to write superhero stories, if you want to write characters from like, you know, these big comic publishers, I love writing fanfic. I think start out with some fanfic, get used to writing characters who already exist in a world, so you don't sort of have to do a lot of that world building stuff, and you just get used to writing in a place you already are, in a place you already enjoy being in.
Yeah, I think that's awesome advice. Reading and writing makes you a better writer.
Yeah.
So I would just say yes to yourself. I think a lot of times, you know, young people and old people, older people, I should say, person, we get nervous about saying we want to write even fan fiction, even just, you know, because sometimes the blank page can be intimidating, or we'll just automatically, before we even start, we might have a dream that we want to write, but we'll say, I can't really do this. I'm not good enough. I don't know how to. Nobody's going to read it. Nobody's going to like it. But what I would just say is like, squash that inner critic and then just say yes to yourself. Like, you want to do this for fun. Like Preeti and I started writing for fun.
Yeah.
We just were like, maybe you just got to not care if you're not worried about being quote unquote good enough. The only way you can really be a writer is by writing. So put your pen to the page and don't be intimidated by it. I know it's easy to say, but just look, you're taking a bet on yourself. What better person to bet on than you?
Aww, that's such a good note to like end on. And we really like appreciate y'all's time and having this event and talking with us here at the LaPorte Branch Library. And yeah, it's like currently our makeshift tripod, but we have this book here, which is Spider-Man Social Dilemma. And we do have copies for everyone who came to our event today. So that's very exciting. And then also you can check out all of y'all's books. I also have Samira's book here, her YA book as well. And all of their books are available at Harris County Public Libraries. And everyone can request either hardcovers or ebooks or audiobooks as well.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
No problem.
I hope you're going to celebrate today, 60th anniversary, 6th day of Friday. I feel like that is so I wish I was there to buy you like a boba tea or something. Another day.
Well, thank y'all so much. And here we have little Spider-Man goodie bags too. So don't forget to grab those.
That's awesome.
You're there.
I'll DM y'all and I'll send y'all one to y'all. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Oh.